Hi. Today we're going to talk about Chapter 7. I'm going to kind of go over that. Mostly my notes have just a summary and a way of understanding them better, kind of because they present you with a great deal of information in that chapter. So I kind of organized it for you in a certain way so that maybe it would kind of help out with what they're trying to say about some differences and how it affects gender communication. We'll also talk about the relationships addendum as well. So we'll start with gender communication, and I want you to realize again and note that the authors state at the very beginning of the chapter that this chapter is not something that's all encompassing. It's not broad. It is based primarily on research that has been done for quite a number of years about common patterns of behavior and communication between men and women and how they differ, and some of the biology also that has to do with the way the brain is structured. So we're basically looking at those kinds of things. We're looking at that nature versus nurture argument as well and how that affects it. And just realize that as I talk about on the first page and reiterate what the authors have said, is that this is not meant to be political statement. It's not meant to be, it's not meant to insinuate that one gender is better than another. It just wants to stress that we do have differences, and sometimes we kind of miss each other. Because of those differences, and just realizing that doesn't mean you have to change your own communication pattern. Well, no, it just means you need to realize where we may fall short and others may fall short as far as understanding one another when we communicate. So it can help sometimes take the sting out of missing each other and not realizing that we have very different ways of processing communication, processing emotions, and talking about our feelings, talking to each other, whether directly or indirectly. So we want to kind of look at that. And some of these things we've talked about already. But again, we want to talk, it really starts at the bottom of your first page, but on to the second page of your notes. And I should have had that ready. Okay, so on the second page, you'll see this is where we kind of want to get into the nature versus nurture argument. And so I've just, again, all I've done is organize some of this information that they give to you. And I don't feel a need to go over everything that's in this handout like I could normally do, because I wanted to just put this in a form that would help you. So, right, I mean, our brains are divided into these two hemispheres, right? You have the right side that controls the abstract, the emotional, creative functions, as well as the left side of our body. And then on the left side, controls detailed, practical, concrete functions, as well as the right side of your body. And so we have this bundle of nerves, fibers, right, that connects those. All right. So, again, it's not like I'm going to ask you to memorize all this information. Mostly you want to get a feel for, oh, I see why we're different. I see why we're kind of missing each other. So the layout or the organization of the brain between men and women, okay, as we look at that idea of the biology behind this, right, you can see in that photo, and again, that graph that's there, it's better definitely in color to see. So I've listed these differences between men and women's brains. And so you can kind of look at that and see how they're organized differently. I think having that visual helps somewhat. That women's brains are definitely more diffused. In other words, we have some of those functions or abilities that are residing in both sides of the brain. All right. Such as emotion and speech centers, which are the ones we want to focus on and how that affects communication. So women have those on both sides of the brain, emotion and speech on both sides of the brain. So we also have 25% more of the nerves connecting the two hemispheres of the brain than men do. Again, too, we know that there are differences even biologically that can occur. We don't want everyone to just have we don't fit into a cookie cutter, right, pattern. So, but this is typical, all right, of how the brain is structured. But certainly there could be anomalies to that. And then we have those speech centers on both sides of our brain. So that means that we're actually going to talk more we're going to talk more, we're going to verbalize more as women. We're also going to, we're going to be able to verbalize emotions more often as well, typically, right? And that is something, this cuts across all cultures too, what we're talking about. So we also, because we have 25% more of those, right, nerves connecting, there's more communication going on between those two hemispheres in women compared to the male brain. And so it's easier for a woman to, as I said, put those emotions into words. But it also explains that there's a difference in separating emotion from logic. And again, you have to bring in personality differences with this too. It does vary. They're just looking at one aspect. So we need to remember that they're not saying, this is all you need to realize about communication between men and women, because that's simply not true. It's just another facet to look at. So when we look at this, we also realize, this is the top of the third page, that women have more difficulty separating the emotion from the logic because of the emotion residing on both sides. Does that mean they can't be logical? Well, of course not. It does not. I know from my own experience that things are, I wish that I could sometimes, like maybe right now. We're living in a difficult and stressful time during this pandemic of COVID-19, for example. And I would like to be able to separate my emotions from other tasks. It's not easy to do. It takes a very concerted effort to be able to. And I can't say that I ever feel like it's completely separate. Now, again, does this mean it's a bad thing? No, not necessarily. Of course not. It's just different. That's all. Because of that too, I might be able to see more of the perspectives about how people's emotions are affected and be able to talk about those things. Whereas if men might be feeling it, they may have a more difficult time verbalizing it. But again, these are affected by personality, by your upbringing, by your education. All of those things do have a bearing. So please don't think that this is limiting anyone really in any kind of way. It's just a more say, oh, I see how that's working inside my head, how the brain is working and how it's affecting things. All right, so men's brains, again, they're more specialized rather than diffuse. Okay, so they will use one side of the brain at a time to perform tasks. So they're not going to do as often the involving the emotions on both sides, or even the verbal again on both sides. It's not going to happen. It's separated, right, in those hemispheres. So we want to remember that, and that's because, and I'll go back to one of the other bullet points up there with women. Because women have their brains are more diffuse, and we will often at least try, right, to multitask, to be working on many different things at one time. We may have difficulty being specific and clear because of the fact that the speech centers are on both sides of the brain, and also then the emotions kind of may come into play there. Women also will continue to work on tasks while at rest, which is why I'm having a very hard time again, because I feel like I have a perpetual list of tasks in my head, especially right now. I feel like there's constantly things. When I wake up, there's a list. The list is there again. So very difficult to be at rest because of the way that brain is structured in women. Whereas men, it's again, it doesn't mean you don't have anxiety and all these other things that can make it difficult. But what it does mean is that you can separate and focus more narrowly and targeted. Okay, so again, it's what we're prone to do, right? So women do tend to see things in a bigger picture because of the diffusion. But again, men are able to focus and zero in, target on a specific task. So again, and all those other things we've discussed have an influence on that as well. So we don't want to discount personality and all the other things in our field of experience, in our environment, that we've grown up with and what the experiences we've accumulated. So we've accumulated quite a few. So men, again, they have the emotion center on the right side of the brain, as your notes say, and the centers for speech, language, and vocabulary are on the left side, and they have fewer nerves connecting. So it's actually physically more difficult, generally speaking, for men to, it takes physical effort, right, to put those things into words, to put especially emotional responses, because why it's got to cross from the right side to the left side. And so is it impossible? Of course not. Does it vary? Yes, absolutely. So I don't want us to think that we are, boxed in any kind of way. So, men's speech tends to be much more direct and practical because there's no emotional interference, and so there can be a lot of frustration. I see this in my grandson already, and the difference between, if I'm, he would rather me just be very clear and just say, I want you to do this and this at this time, rather than saying, I'd like you to try to help out more. I want you to, be a part of, what do you think your responsibilities should be in the family? So that's very indirect. Not that it doesn't have its place, right? But for him, it's easier if I just say exactly what it is. It's easier for him to understand and to get through, what am I talking about? All right. So hopefully that kind of makes sense. They do go into, hormonal differences as well, which I'm sure you're more familiar with those, and the differences that can make, right? And again, I'm pretty sure much of this is not new to you. Some things I will point out is that of course more female hormones decrease some of the things like aggression, competition, self-assertion, self-confidence, self-reliance. Their hormones tend to make them, again, it tends to influence them in the opposite direction. So again, don't feel like that has control over anybody. It's just an influence that we have. And it's interesting to see that during the time that the fetus is developing, that there's a wash of hormones that occurs, right? And that those can kind of occur in a surge, influencing the brain into different directions. So that's kind of interesting. I know growing up that, I was both a girly girl in certain ways, as they say, quote unquote, but also I was someone who I loved, sitting in the dirt and getting salamanders and frogs and toads and fishing, and I loved all that stuff just as much. So I really did both. I collected Matchbox cars, which I don't even know if they make anymore. I did things that a lot of times boys would do, but I also did plenty of things that girls would do. My parents were very traditional as far as male and female roles as I grew up, but at the same time, they never denied me any of those things. It was just who I was. This is part of my personality to want to do things. My mother would get very upset with me when I remember I had a birthday one time, and she had given me this beautiful, like, pastel blue and white gingham checked tunic and these bright white shorts, and I sat down in the sandbox all day, and she could not get the stain out. She was very upset with me. So, but again, other than that, there were things. It's just, there are things that influence us in lots of kinds of ways and directions. But there are these differences too, that we want to look at and be aware of. And again, some of this you probably were already aware of, because it does affect our communication, and we just kind of miss each other. We miss understanding each other. So on the next page, at the top, it says men's self-reliance means, again, because they're very independent, which is a great thing to be. But sometimes they just want to take care of things themselves because of this self-reliance. So, and again, I can't emphasize enough how much this is going to vary according to lots of different variables. Okay. All right. You've got women tend to be more nurturing due to hormonal influences, and men, they want men because of this to express feelings of care and concern. And again, look, I've got a brother who has custody of his of his kids. And he was he was in a very traditional role, and was not the caretaker at home every day. But now he's doing all of these things. So, and he's extremely nurturing. So again, just, put it into perspective. Realize that these are variations and they occur at different levels in people, but they're definitely there, right? These distinctions are there, and it's not about somebody being better than somebody else. It's just being different, just plain different. Just like personalities, we're different. We have different strengths, different challenges. I don't like to call them weaknesses. I like to say challenges. So, and that's okay. All right, that we have that. All right. So they do go into some of these other, the brain chemicals, which are typically lower, remember, in men, serotonin, which is the chemical, right, in the brain that helps produce a calming effect, and oxytocin, which is the bonding chemical, right, and the higher the level of that is, the more empathic that the person tends to be, and the more the person seeks companionship. So, it could be your book suggests why men want to act first and talk later, or behave more aggressively, or come across at least less empathetically. Because I think that they definitely, empathy can be going on and you just don't see it. It's not communicated. So again, I don't want anybody falling into any kind of stereotype with any of this. So, they do go into the nurture argument. Again, this is your environment and how you've been raised and taught and how that has shaped you, which we've talked about before. But we do want media influences gender. How is a woman supposed to be? What are they supposed to look like? What are they supposed to be able to do? What does a man look like? What is he supposed to be able to do? Not every woman is going to look a certain way, be whatever, 6 feet tall with, a model type of person. There's not a guy who looks like he's been constantly buffing up we're all kinds of shapes and sizes and types, and they're all great. So everybody's great. But we do, and we've already talked about how these stereotypes can affect us in a bad way. We talked about that before with self-concept. So, but these stereotypes, as the book suggests, have been changing. They have been changing slowly. They're still there, so don't think that they're gone away. That people are supposed to behave certain ways, and that the perfect woman looks like this, perfect man looks like that, the perfect whatever person looks like this, and and does this and can do these things, and never does this. So that does not exist. We established that before. Okay. So, and we certainly know how the media affects us, and we are inundated with media more than ever. And sometimes we can look at it too much. So, we need to be reflecting on that and how it might be affecting us. So they talk about the idea of cross communication, where, we're using our own gender style and we're kind of expecting the other person to be able to communicate and respond the same way we are, because we think naturally. Remember, we're kind of think about ourselves first. We think of ourselves more positively, that I'm doing it the right way, right? And so you need to do it this way. And so we're having a lot of problems sometimes with that. And so, there's a chart on 129 that you can look at and kind of check yourself in with what the authors are saying regarding this idea of gender and communication, with the points that they're trying to make. So they talk about the opaque rule on 131, right? And that is the idea of treating someone the way they want to be treated. So what they're saying, right, is that because males and females just kind of, miss each other, then we need to remember, right, how they're different. And you can look at the case study in the book, right, with the couple, because, he wants to just get his work done. He doesn't really need any help, even though she means well by offering the help. That's not what he needs, and that's not what he wants. And so they miss each other. She has hurt feelings because she's just trying to help and doing everything. And he's just like, well, if I could just get this done, then I can relax. So it's important. So if you didn't read that case study yet, I would do that, because you can really see how they're missing each other, and apply this opaque rule. Think not just do unto others. That's perfectly fine. It's an excellent rule to follow, that you do unto others as you would have them do unto you. But you also want to, again, just realize you're not changing who you are, okay? But you're realizing that what some other people, and again, here we're talking about men and women, are not necessarily thinking it through the same way you are. They are not necessarily have the intention of a misunderstanding. So women kind of practicing, for example, being more direct, and men realizing that there's more going on that a woman might be trying to express. That's helpful in itself. And there's been lots of research and books about this. You probably heard of that pretty well-known book about men are from Mars and women are from Venus. So that's been around a long time. But again, there's been research done for quite a while, and there's still more biological research. So feel free to kind of look up more about that, and just realize these are just patterns. They're biological patterns as well as environmental patterns, and that kind of helps us to just understand each other better. It's just another way to realize where we may be misunderstanding one another and not fully realizing what someone's trying to express or not able to express. All right, so now you're looking at the handout for relationships.